Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me, that I might know your mind. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll sing a song of love and a rose in the winter time. And a rose in the winter time.
Hi, neighbor.
Hi, neighbor. Welcome to our Baja for Worship, the collaboration of the 4 Unitarian Universalist congregations here in southern Arizona. We gather at different times and in many different places, so whenever and wherever you are welcome here. We are currently exploring the theme, Won't You Be My Neighbor? And with the help of multiple guest speakers, we're opening up to what it means to neighbor, to draw near to one another through this time of physical distancing. Now, our guest speakers so far, Reverend Anthony Johnson and Alex Capitan, have offered their experience and wisdom concerning spiritual practices of democracy and of radical welcome. Each of them has challenged me to view our congregations as not yet being the beloved neighborhood that I believed we already were. Reverend Anthony said, "You're going to have to break a few eggs to make an omelet." And that prepared me to crack open my assumptions about who I think we are. And in turn, that prepared me for Alex's question. What are you willing to do to change that? How can you resist the urge to already have all the answers and to ask more questions, to try new things and transform your heart? So they both challenged me to ask myself, what do I need to learn to become a beloved neighbor that I really want to be? I need their wisdom and experience to come to that answer, and of course, I need yours too. When we pause together each week and hold that we live on stolen land, taken from the indigenous peoples, the Pasqua, the Yaqui, the Otham, that in that moment, we pause together, crack open our assumptions, ask ourselves challenging questions, and then move more closely to becoming the beloved neighbors that our Unitarian Universalist faith invites us all to become. And during this worship, we'll learn more about how to neighbor from Janine Gelsinger, the executive director of UU Jazz, our justice network here in Arizona. Janine's generous spirit and loving presence is already shared among our 13 congregations here in Arizona, but she's with us to help us break a couple of eggs, ask some challenging questions, and to call us to neighbor beyond voting. But before we begin, we have a special announcement. Reverend Bethany?
Thanks, Matthew.
Yes, I have some exciting news to share with you all this morning, and that is that your boards and your ministers have been working over the past month or 6 weeks to form a shared staff position for our Baja 4 worship services. And starting today, Chris Tackett, the pianist from the UU Church of Tucson, who you all have seen, will also be serving as the Baja 4 music coordinator. Chris's role will be to streamline and facilitate the music selection and planning processes for our worship services, and to integrate our lay musicians more into our worship services, because we know you have so many gifts to offer. So if you're a lay musician, you'll be hearing from Chris in the next few weeks or months about how you might get involved and lend your gifts to our worships. Chris will be employed by UUCT only and supervised by me as UUCT's minister. And I've got a gift for Chris. My kitty's trying to get into the gift, but we didn't really coordinate how to get this to him. Maybe you could pass it to him?
What? Oh! Hello. Oh, how beautiful. Thank you. And just in time, too. My last orchid just dropped its last flower last week. Thank you so much to all the Baja 4 ministers and the boards and the congregations. I'm really looking forward to being able to enhance the spirit of collaboration and cooperation amongst all of our churches as we come together in these weekly worship services like this. In fact, musicians of the Baja 4, instrumentalists and singers, be on the lookout. I'm going to be sending out an invitation in the next week or two for all of you to come and join us and to be a part of the fun. Thank you all so much.
If you have a chalice, I invite you to prepare it and share with me in this chalice lighting. These words come to us by my friend and colleague, the Reverend Dana Warsnop, and they're called, I Want to Be with People. Often, people say that they love coming to a place with so many like-minded people. And I know just what they're getting at, and I know that they aren't getting it quite right. I don't want to be with a bunch of people who think just like me. I want to be in a beloved community where I don't have to think like everyone else to be loved, to be eligible for salvation. I want to be with people who value compassion, justice, love, and truth, though they have different thoughts and opinions about all sorts of things. I want to be with independent-minded people of good heart. I want to be with people who have many names and no name at all for God. I want to be with people who see me in my goodness and dignity, and also see my failings and foibles, and who still love me. I want to be with people who feel their interconnection with all existence and let it guide their footfalls upon the earth. I want to be with people who see life as a paradox and don't always rush to resolve it. I want to be with people who are willing to walk the tightrope that is life and who will hold my hand as I walk mine. I want to be with people who let church call them to a different way of being in the world. I want to be with people who support, encourage, and even challenge each other to higher and more ethical living. I want to be with people who inspire one another to follow the call of the Spirit. I want to be with people who covenant to be honest, engaged, and kind, who strive to keep their promises and hold me to the promises I make. I want to be with people who give of themselves, who share their hearts and minds and gifts. I want to be with people who know that the human community is often warm and generous, and sometimes challenging, and almost always a grand adventure. In short, I want to be with people like you.
When I lift my voice, let it be in song, a defiant note in the face of wrong. I am not alone, we are side by side, 'cause we know that love is always justified. When they try to divide us, it will only unite us. I lift my voice. When I lift my voice, let it be for good. Let me care as much as I know I should. I am not alone, we are side by side, 'cause we know that love is always justified. When they try to divide us, it will only unite us. I lift my voice. I lift my voice.
Welcome, neighbor. Today's Story for Action is brought to you by Sky Island Unitarian Universalist Church. It's from a neighborhood 8 miles north of where our church is located, in Huachuca City. And this is a project that has been going on for about 2 years, and many of our members have been involved with it since its beginning. It's a story about how one person can have an idea and a dream and get other people to help her make it happen. Today, I'm going to interview Ann Oust, who is in Huachuca City, and she's a member of Sky Island, also the grant writer extraordinaire for the Huachuca City Community Gardens. So, Ann, how did Sky Islanders help with this project?
Well, Sky Islanders not only donated money to help us get going and provide tools and so forth, but they also donated their precious time to help us in the garden, and they also teach with respect to good soils and how to grow vegetables and how to harvest.
And how did the Huachuca City Community Gardens come to be?
It all started with Holly Weichelt driving through Huachuca City, a food desert, and wondering how she could help the 35% of the population that was below poverty and not getting enough fresh food. She started a Facebook page asking if anyone in Huachuca City would be able to provide land for a garden that could both provide vegetables and a teaching venue so that residents could learn how to grow their own food. One of our prominent business leaders, James Goad, stepped up and said he could provide the garden for a short period of time on a vacant lot behind his property. And he put together a group of individuals who could help Holly do the gardening, which we did in 2019.
So after 2019, you had to find a more sustainable place.
Yes, and that happened by working with the city, Huachuca City, and the librarian. She provided land behind the library by helping put together a memorandum of understanding. We got a grant proposal funded to build the garden, and that started 2020. and we produced 3,500 pounds of produce this year and provided this produce to 70 to 90 people per week, which is only about 10 to 15% of the population in need. So that's where teaching comes in. We decided that we really needed to teach the gardening. We haven't been able to because of COVID, but that's one of our goals for next year, to teach people how to garden.
You'll have a teaching garden.
Yes.
And you'll also teach the kids STEM.
Yes, that's for other things besides teaching adults. Our primary goal in the actual teaching garden is for children. All aspects, from gardening to nature to STEM learning. STEM learning is what we feel is incredibly important to help bring children in poverty out of poverty into a way of taking care of themselves financially in their futures.
Right, so that they'll learn STEM and they'll also learn how to garden so they can always feed themselves.
Yes.
And you have said that food brings people together. It's brought them together over millennia. So has this garden actually helped strengthen the community of Huachuca City?
Yes, this has, because we have people in our group who have gone beyond helping just distribute. They're actually going door to door, and other people in the community are helping with our efforts.
Anne, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for the work you're doing in Huachuca City and in the garden, and helping the community help itself connect while growing good food. And if anyone else is interested in finding out more, please visit the website for the Huachuca City Community Gardens and think about ways you can donate or start a garden or community strengthening project of your own. Anne, do you have any final words?
Yes, this has been an amazing journey for all of us involved in Huachuca City Community Garden. We've also had our eyes opened to the extreme need in our community. It's far more pervasive than we had imagined when we started. But we continue to be amazed at the generosity and genuine caring of the people in our community once they become aware of the serious problems that exist. Communication begins, and the problems can be solved.
That, my friends, is how you have an epic kitchen dance party. I try to have them a lot, and sometimes I get that response where Tarek will come in and join me, and sometimes the response is more eye-rolling and going back to flop on the sofa. And that's the choice that we all have when we think about joining a movement, and we think about things that we can do to change our society, right? We can cross our arms and flop on the sofa and continue to watch Netflix. We can come up with our own brilliant new idea and have 2 dance parties in the kitchen. Or we can join somebody else's dance party. That's what I heard happened in the Huachuca City Garden, is that somebody had this really wonderful idea on how to help their community. She couldn't have done it by herself. She could have gone and flopped her arms and sat back on the sofa and watched Netflix. She could have tried to do it all by herself, but man, what a lot of work to do. What happened was a group of people came together to make it happen. They came together to work together to solve this problem in their community. And we see the results. So a movement isn't made simply by having a leader, simply by having a person with a great idea. That's just a person with a great idea. A movement, change, anything that we want to improve in society takes teamwork and more than one person. So that's my challenge for you, is to be the second person. Find a movement, find something that's really important to you, and join it. You don't have to solve it all on your own, and you don't have to come up with a newer, better, greater mousetrap to do it. Join with the people that are already doing it. Join a kitchen dance party that's already happening. So here's a riddle. What do you call a person who follows? A movement maker.
To Be of Use by Marge Piercy. The people I love best jump into work, head first, without dallying in the shallows, and swim off with sure strokes almost out of sight. They seem to become natives of that element, the black, sleek heads of seals bouncing like half-submerged balls. I love people who harness themselves an ox to a heavy cart, who pull like water buffalo with massive patience, who strain in the mud and the muck to move things forward, who do what has to be done again and again. I want to be with people who submerge in the task, who go into the fields to harvest and work in a row and pass the bags along, who are not parlor generals and field deserters, but move in a common rhythm when the food must come in or the fire be put out. The work of the world is common as mud. Botched, it smears the hands, crumbles to dust. But the thing worth doing well done has a shape that satisfies, clean and evident. Greek amphoras for wine or oil, Hopi vases that held corn are put in museums, but you know they were made to be used. The pitcher cries for water to carry, and a person for work that is real.
You the Vote started as an experiment when at General Assembly, UUA President Susan Frederick Gray said, "Let's UU the vote in 2020. Since then, Unitarian Universalists have been encouraged to reflect on our values and engage in values-based conversations in our communities about how elections shape our world. Arizona congregations have engaged in this work through UU Jazz. Through a shared grant we applied for together from the UU Funding Panel and UU the Vote National, we hired an amazing UU the Vote coordinator, Casey Klaus, a raised UU, an environmental justice organizer with Sunrise Movement Tempe, an attorney, and a former candidate for Tempe City Council. She's led weekly Tuesday action hours, engaging UUs in ways to be involved with nonpartisan electoral organizing with partners across the state from grassroots organizations and through weekly emails. Friends, I'm so excited to be here with you this month in your series about neighbors. Not just because I was raised on PBS and I'm a huge Mr. Rogers stan, I am though, but also because this month's service arc has also ended up being a series of hard truths. Bringing you hard truths isn't easy for me. My first instinct was to bring an inspiring, energizing, celebratory You the Vote service here about our shared work together. I tried to write that sermon. I tried to write it for 2 weeks. 2 weeks, I wrestled with writing a positive, uplifting You the Vote sermon. You know, dominant culture tells me as a woman that I should smile and create a pleasant experience, make sure others around me are at ease. And as a white person, I've been socialized to avoid conflict, to not rock the boat or make others or myself feel uncomfortable. Our capitalist culture tells me that challenging the members of our network, whose participation and donations make up UU Jazz, is not in keeping with the customer is always right. And most importantly, I value our relationships. I don't want to do anything to jeopardize our relationships. But in the end, I couldn't ignore that this is the sermon that I have to offer to us. A wise minister told me once that sometimes you have to let the Spirit move through you. Naming truths, even and perhaps especially when it's hard, is what our shared faith is calling me to do in this moment. And I say them to you because I trust you enough, I love you enough to believe that you want to know. So although my heart is racing right now, as Susan Frederick Gray says, this is no time for a casual faith. So here I am, like Reverend Anthony Johnson and Alex Capitan before me, inviting you into a community conversation, a courageous community conversation, a challenging community conversation. Because when I think about you, the vote, today, on November 1st, 2 days before a world-changing election, the truth is, I don't know if we did enough. I don't know if we, as UUs, did enough to stop the rise of fascism, of racism, of violence. I don't know if we did enough, and I'm holding that today. Will you hold it with me? Can we have this courageous conversation as a community? Because while it is true that about 100 of you got engaged in You the Vote Arizona, it's also true that there are almost 2,000 UUs in Arizona. Can you help me hold both these truths, the both and of it? Now, it's true that some of us didn't participate in You the Vote directly because we were engaged in working with another group or a political party that we belonged to, and we were working hard there and doing good things. And if that's you, I see you. I see your work. It's also true that some of us chose to follow the lead of organizations controlled by white people with wealth and power instead of following the lead of our partner groups, led by historically marginalized people, by young Latinx folks at Arizona Center for Empowerment, by our Sunrise Youth, by our queer and trans, Black and brown leaders as part of 1AZ Coalition. It's true that at General Assembly and beyond, many of us participated in national phone banks to Florida, Texas, Wisconsin, Ohio, and we totaled almost 2 million calls. It's also true that our Arizona National UU phone bank only had 12 of us, most of us from out of state. It's true that some of us engaged in relational organizing, calling our friends and family and having hard conversations about the voting choices your values called you to this election cycle. It's also true that some of us chose to write postcards instead because it was more comfortable than having one-to-one conversations. That we said we weren't willing to talk to our friends and family about politics, despite the evidence and advice that it's 5 times more effective than phone or text banking and 20 times more effective than postcards. Now, it is true that some of us have real barriers to using technology. We have accessibility or disability needs, or we don't have what's needed to phone and text bank in our homes. It's also true that some of us chose not to phone or text bank because it was uncomfortable to make the effort of learning something new. It's true that for many of us, there's a clear link from our UU values to electing folks willing to change the structures and systems that keep us from a just, equitable, and compassionate world. And it's true that some of us were angry that You the Vote even existed, wanting to remain apolitical and keep values-based conversations out of our churches. While it's true that the candidate forums we hosted in Arizona about climate and homelessness received over 1,000 views, It's also true that many of us chose to skip out on direct engagement and change making on nights where we wanted to watch conventions and debates that honestly are viewable anytime. It is true that UU the Vote National and UU the Vote Arizona here at UU Jazz upheld the leadership of LGBTQ plus folks, Black folks, disabled folks, and young people by hiring them as organizers and leaders in our campaigns, recognizing that those closest to the problems are also those with the solutions. And it's also true that I've seen these same leaders, these organizers, in tears time and time again as they receive an onslaught of criticism, mistrust, rudeness, and abuse from their fellow UUs, unwilling to follow anyone's leadership but their own. Friends, these truths might be hard for you to hear. They were hard for me to say to you. But I believe that as our third principle tells us, we are committed to supporting each other in our own spiritual growth in our congregations. And how can we grow if we don't know where we're at? How can we grow if we're not willing to hold each other accountable, to speak hard truths and to hear hard truths? My teammate Toy, a longtime organizer for justice here in Arizona, says that there are two reasons that folks aren't fully engaged: futility and fear. Now, if folks think that efforts are futile, we can engage them through education. We can talk about examples of previous campaigns, the strategies we employed and how they were successful, and draw on that educational experience of success to push back against that feeling of futility. But to combat fear, education doesn't work. That takes agitation. It takes that feeling deep inside that if we don't change, if we don't do something, we are more afraid of what will happen than we are afraid of the means to get there. I get nervous phone banking. I get anxious talking to my family members who hold different views. But I'm more afraid of fascism. I know that regardless of the results of this election, most of us will be safe, but some of us won't. Some of us won't make it through this pandemic, through the uprising, the protests, through a world where their rights and their lives are stripped away. And that's a world I cannot live with. I'm more afraid of that world than I am of getting hung up on, or a rift in my family, of being at my polling place Tuesday, defending democracy against a virus that has already almost killed me once. As some of you already know, I was recently hired by Meadville Lombard Theological School on the Beloved Conversations curriculum design team. Our team is tasked with helping over 1,000 white UUs look deeply at the ways dominant culture has impacted us within ourselves. And I believe that this work is tangled up in why we didn't have bigger participation in UU the Vote. The narratives we've been fed about the importance of remaining comfortable, our avoidance of situations that may lead to conflict, and our need to believe that our only responsibility is our individual vote and not in supporting others. These are white cultural narratives. And I'm proud to say that so many of us, 96 people in Arizona, have chosen to engage in this work together. Is there good news in this sermon? Well, the good news is that this work doesn't end on Tuesday. UU the Vote was never about this one election. No matter who we elect, locally and nationally, the work continues. Because, as organizers say, we aren't electing a savior. We are voting to choose our battleground. One piece of the UU the Vote campaign that I think was largely misunderstood was why this work is nonpartisan. It's not just because our 501c3 status is threatened if we name candidates out loud, or because we think our faith tradition shouldn't be political. It's because there isn't a current political party on the ballot that perfectly represents our vision of the beloved community, that vision that UU strive towards, and our values. No matter what choices we make for any race on the ballot, we are electing leaders that we will then have to push to hold accountable and to move towards representing inherent worth and dignity for all. One thing we learned through this experiment of UU the Vote is that most of our congregations, not all, but most of our UUs haven't been trained in organizing strategies. So this spring through UU Jazz, we'll host a series to engage in what it looks like to organize our congregations together. As UUs, we are really good at spiritual support. We're good at fundraising. We're pretty good at partnerships. But as of yet, we aren't fully organized to harness our collective power as a state. We have 2,000 UUs in Arizona. What would it look like if we took that collective power and we pushed out elected officials into making big, systemic changes for the climate, for LGBTQ plus rights, for women and for Black, Indigenous, and people of color? Hold that vision with me. On the next 2 Saturdays after the election, we at UU Jazz will host a workshop entitled No Matter What. It's led by our friend and team member, Reverend Anthony Johnson, where we will, as he says, engage in removing unconscious debris from the soil of our souls. The spiritual mulching that allows us to show up more fully, to accept some of these hard truths, and to do the work we need to do, to be a people that say we side with love, and then to rise up to do just that. In closing, y'all, we tried a thing, and we learned some things. Thank you for being willing to hear some hard truths today, for staying in relationship as a state network of UUs together. And may we continue to loosen the grips of fear, of comfort, of dominant cultural narratives, so that we can show up together.
We know that things need to change in the world. We're willing to look at what needs to change. We're willing to hear those voices. And sometimes when we get new information, when we get a new perspective, it can bring things up. For myself, I can feel panicky, realizing there's one more thing that needs my attention, that needs my effort. And it's really tempting in those moments to say, what can I do? Tell me, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. I know things need to change. And if you would just tell me what to do, I will help you. That panic, that desire for a quick fix, sometimes leads to skipping the first thing that happens when we have new information. When you hear something new or something that you're learning from, something that changes your own perspective, the first thing to do is to take it in and let it change you. And you know what I'm going to say. Let's take a few breaths together. Anytime that we're learning something, we're opening ourselves up to be changed. The beauty of allowing ourselves to be changed is that that is how the world changes. So I invite you, whenever you feel that question, what can I do? To first take a breath and notice, how do I feel? Take a moment to acknowledge your emotions and your body. It might sound like I'm not doing anything if you take time with yourself, but actually, so often by taking time with ourselves, we actually have more energy to give. So you take a breath, notice how you feel, and then before asking anyone else, ask yourself, what will I do? I can tell you all sorts of things that you could do. But if you know for yourself what you want to do, what is arising for you, that is the most important information. So let's take a few more breaths now as we let whatever information is new to us, whatever we are learning, let that settle in and invite it to change us so that we can be part of changing the world.
Loosen, loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Loosen, loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Holy breath and holy name. Will you ease this pain? Holy breath and holy name. Will you ease this pain? Loosen, loosen, baby, and you don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Loosen, loosen, baby, and you don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go. Loosen, loosen, baby, and you don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go. Loosen, loosen, baby, and you don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go. Loosen, loosen, baby, and you don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go. The weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go. The weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go. The weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go.
These past few weeks, we have heard some truths that were hard for some of us to hear. That our democracy isn't as democratic as it could be. That our congregations aren't as welcoming as they could be. That our justice work isn't as relational as it could be. Which is to say, we are imperfect, and we've got some work to do. What else is new? Loosen. We carry the weight of this world together. Loosen. Loosen. And as Janine said, no matter what happens this Tuesday, we will have some work to do on Wednesday. Because as the organizer that Janine quoted said, in this election, we aren't electing our savior. We are choosing our battleground. No matter the outcome of the election, we will have to push the administration towards the country we dream about. A country with community mutual aid and scaled down systems of policing. A country where prisons do not profit from incarcerating people and restoration of relationship is the goal. A country with compassionate immigration policies and no walls, where we can reclaim or maybe just claim our identity as a nation open to all. A country with full civil rights and protections for trans people, queer people, persons with disabilities, and their families. A country where people with uteruses have full agency over their bodies, and that agency is fully extended to people of color with uteruses. This is the world that I, and I know many of you, dream about. And there's a trend across Unitarian Universalist congregations that I find really interesting. And that is this. In Unitarian Universalist congregations in the United States, our Sunday morning attendance numbers are higher, when a Republican holds the office of President of the United States. What does that say about us? What does that say about when we feel we need spiritual nourishment and support and community? And what does that say about who we believe we are? To be very clear, our congregations do not exist to support one political party or one political agenda. Our congregations exist to profess our shared values, which sometimes come out in politics, our values which are based in justice. That love is love, that Black lives matter, that climate change is real, that no human being is illegal, that all genders are whole, holy, and good, and that people with uteruses have agency over their bodies. These values are not fully and completely supported by either of the two major political parties in our country right now. We will have to fight for these values no matter which administration fills the White House and the halls of Congress come January. Friends, the task is mighty, and the allure of complacency into white upper middle class culture is real and strong. And there is too much at stake for us to fall into that complacency. Beyond voting, I can see the struggle for liberation and equity and restoration of relationship, and I see myself there. And I see you there. May we commit right now and right here to that struggle and that fight. The world is ready. We are ready. Let's get to it.
The tide is rising, and so are we. The
tide is rising, and so are we. The tide is rising, and so are we. This is where we are called to be. This is where we are called to be. The task is mighty, and so are we. The task is mighty, and so are we. The task is mighty, and so are we. This is where we are called to be. This is where we are called to be. The world is ready, and so are we. The world is ready, and so are we. The world is ready, and so are we. This is where we are called to be. This is where we are called to be. The tide is rising, and so are we. The tide is rising, and so are we. The tide is rising, and so are we. This is where we are called to be. This is where we are called to be. This is where we are called to be. This is where